everyone, and welcome to another video from Colour with Claire. So today I've decided to begin a series of colouring different flower types. So it's going to be sort of medium realistic, and what I mean by that is that I can't colour things that are hyper realistic and look like a photograph that you could pick up off the page. But it's not just as simple and basic as block colouring a flower either. So we are trying to create some illusion of form around the petals, a little bit of depth, you know, your shading, your highlights, you know the drill. So today on this video I'm going to be showing you how I colour an orchid. So the book that I'm using to do this is called Flower Haiku by Ellie Marks. I'm just about to review it, so if that's not already up on my channel it will be very shortly. It's a gorgeous book, kind of in between the style of Joanna Basford and Maria Troll and a little bit Hannah Carlson thrown in. It's beautiful. So yes, this is how I've done them so far. I'm going to bring them out of the glare because if I put them straight underneath my overhead light you can just see wax, but if I bring them out of the glare you can see how they look. So I'm going to be using Arteza pencils to do this particular one. Now on my other videos, for example, I've got one coming up of tiger lilies, I'm going to be using luminance. So for every different flower that I do, I'll try and use a different medium, a different brand of coloured pencil or what have you, just so that everyone's got kind of a fair chance, and there's probably something that all of you will have. And if not, you can just find the colours in whichever pencil brand you have. So I'm going to put this to one side, and we have an orchid down here. I'll just move all of the things out of my very small desk. We can practice on this one. So I'll leave these to the side so I can reference them. And yeah, let's get started. So the Arteza pencils I've chosen from dark to light are Eggplant, which is number 86, Fuchsia, number 14, Peony, very fitting, 26, and Yellow Sapphire, 28. So make sure they're all nice and sharp, very important, especially when you're using quite hard coloured pencils like these. Keep them sharp and it'll be easier to colour. So I'm starting off with my darkest, as I usually do. This is the Eggplant, and I will zoom in so that you can see. Just give me a second for it all to focus and get in the right place. I've got loads of different pencils and things lined up, so I need to move all of those. Not organised whatsoever. Okay, there we go. So we're in the frame now, I think. So what I do first of all is I take my Eggplant, the darkest colour, and it is kind of a deep purple, I would say. If you're using Prismacolor, to go for Dahlia purple. That's the one I think it matches up to. Making sure we're focused. Yep. So I'm going to start off by doing the three petals that are behind in the background of the orchid. So that's these three. They kind of look a little bit like strawberry skin. And we're going to start by just colouring the inside of this teardrop shape. So I'm not going too heavy pressure at the moment because Arteza pencils are quite hard. So they do need to be layered a little bit, but as you know, I don't really like doing a lot of layers because it just takes too long. So it's not going to be, you know, it's not going to be a very long process. So once you've coloured the inside of the teardrop, try and taper it a little bit as you go up toward the top, so it's a little bit thicker at this bottom area. And then of course, as with any blending, you always want to make sure that it's darker at the back, so right up against the line, and then you're lightening your pressure as you come outwards, so it's going to have a foundation, a light foundation of colour for the next one to blend into. So that next one is Fuchsia, number 14. So we go over the light pigment that we put down. I'm sure you're very acquainted with how I blend if you've watched all of my videos, but just in case you haven't, we're going over the light that we put down with the Eggplant, and that will just help to blend in the two colours together. So again, just trying to keep this U shape And again, light pressure for the next colour to blend. You see how I've kept a little bit of white space there. Now we can move on back to the eggplant, so back to your darkest colour, and do a little bit of a arch shape. So it's not going to be right up against the top line, it's going to be a little bit further down, kind of, I guess, well, not quite in the middle, a little bit more toward the line, but not right up against it. So let's just do it so you see what I mean. So following the arch of this petal, I'm going to very, very quickly and simply put down my own little arch of colour, and that is with the eggplant, the darkest one. So once you've got your shape down, you can then go in and darken it up sort of in the middle of that line, but making sure that you're leaving the nice light pressure fuzzy edges either side for the next colour to blend. So hopefully you can see that properly. I don't know whether I'm getting glare on this. I will have to keep moving it. But at the end of this, I'll get it out of the way of the overhead light so that you can see. It might look a little bit waxy and a little bit odd at certain stages because of that overhead light, but don't worry, it does look different to the eye. So that is the little arch shape that we've made, and we've made sure that all the way around it, top and bottom, we've got a little bit of a fuzzy edge for us to then go in and blend our fuchsia. So again, going over the edge, but not quite to the line. We're leaving a white gap at the moment. Oh, this is where it, I was just about to say, this is where it helps having sharp pencils, because there's not a lot of room to play with, but then if you have them too sharp, they'll just break like that one did. So I'm going underneath the line as well, and sort of bringing it down either side towards the teardrop that we did. So there we go. So we've created an almost, I don't know, 8 shape. So we've got like a larger bit here and a larger bit here. So then when you've done that, you want to come in with your next colour, which is Peony, number 26. And for this one, I don't do much of a highlight on this back leaf. So we're just going to block fill the white that we've left with the Peony. And this will create a little bit of a matte texture on this petal. It's still blended, it's still got some interest to the eye, but it's just going to sink into the background a little bit more when we compare it to these large petals at the front. So you colour your Peony, try and do some at the top here, leaving still your little white gap. If possible. And then with that little white gap, you'll then take your yellow sapphire and just go over it. Now this yellow is I think it's the lightest yellow in the pack of 72 Arteza pencils. So it's not a bright warm canary yellow, it's quite a light yellow. I would probably say a lemon yellow if you're using Prismas. And once you've put that on, you can see that the lines, they still look quite harsh. It looks nice, but they look quite separate from each other. So we're just going to blend that out a little bit. So we're going to go back with the eggplant and very lightly, so I'm not using any kind of heavy pressure on this whatsoever. Very lightly, I'm just going over that dark arch that we made. And just that light bit of pigment, without any pressure on the hand, will serve to blur out the line a little bit more, so it's not as stark. Now while you're there, you could come in and deepen up your little teardrop, and then move on to the next colour, which was the fuchsia. Do exactly the same thing, so blending out all the time, but you do not need a lot of pressure because you've already put a really good base layer down. And then again with the Peony, just to finish off. Now the last thing that I would do is, because I feel that the yellow doesn't really look like, I mean, you could leave it like that, there's nothing wrong with it, it looks quite nice, bold and vibrant, but what I like to do, just to blur it a little bit more and make it look a bit more realistic, I don't know, is just to take your peony and with no pressure whatsoever, just touching the pencil to the paper, go over the yellow just once, okay, and I don't know if you can see, but it's just softened the yellow. It's not got rid of it completely, but it's softened it, so it's not as bright and sort of neon looking as it was. But as I say, that is a optional step that you might not want to take if you want to keep that kind of bold look to it, but totally up to you. What I would say, just looking at this now, because that's what I think you should always do, you know, when you're following tutorials and things, just take a step back and look at your own piece and see if there's anything you want to change. And in this instance, I would probably just make the archway just slightly more soft, because I still think there's a bit too much of a line there, and I'd rather it just looks like it's something organic, that you know, the petal has changed colours here rather than something linear. So just with the eggplant, again, no pressure, don't need it. You can just soften that a little bit so it doesn't look as shapely, I guess. So yeah, pretty happy with that. Just you know me, I'll just mess about with it a little bit with the colours. But yes, that's how I do that petal. Now the bottom two petals, pretty much the same thing, but we're not really having that archway or the teardrop to contend with. So I'll do it all in real time. Let me just take a drink. I'll do it all in real time so that you can follow along with me, because I know it's difficult sometimes with speed colouring. So yes, back to the eggplant. Now I'm going to use the bottom of these two leaves as my shadowed area, or my darkest area anyway. So eggplant, I'm just block colouring right up against the bottom line of this petal. But always remembering, as we move upward, where we're going to place the next colour, our pressure gets lighter. You can hopefully see the difference between the very darkest area at the bottom and then the very light wisp of colour to the top. Next is the fuchsia. So just going straight up in a very sort of linear blend, so nothing super skilled about this. It's just the way that you would normally blend from colour to colour. So we've gone over the light pressure eggplant to blend, and then we're moving up to light pressure fuchsia as we go upward. And I'm also kind of leaving this very edge here blank for the moment, because I want to put the yellow there, and that's going to be our lightest part. So moving on to that peony, I'm bringing it out this way, and we've got this white gap down the edge here, which is going to be for the yellow. So hopefully you see what I mean about just wanting to soften it a little bit so it's not as bright, which is what I've just done there with the peony. So just going over it really lightly. If you use any sort of pressure, you're just going to completely erase all of that yellow. So you really want to do it really lightly, so it just looks like a glow almost on the edge of the petal. Exactly the same on the other side. Again, we'll do it in real time together. So eggplant at the bottom. So we're kind of going in this direction. So we're going from dark to light, but in this direction, not up at bottom to top. We're kind of going this way because the way that the petal is situated. And then we've got our fuchsia. Making sure that you're using a little bit harder pressure as you go over the line where the eggplant ended, because that's what will blend it. And then just getting lighter as we go. Now, if there are any areas where you think the eggplant fuchsia line is just too harsh, you can go back in with the eggplant very lightly. And that should hopefully just make it look a little bit more gradiated, if that's a word. Peony is last before our yellow. So this might seem like quite a long process for one flower, but I think because I'm showing you as a demonstration step by step and I don't want to go too fast, that's why. But when you're colouring them, once you've done one or two, it becomes sort of second nature, this technique, because you know where all your colours are going. It's about colour placement really, more than anything. So I've put my yellow on, finishing off just with that light tickle of peony over the yellow. And that is the back petals done. Just going to use the fuchsia to make sure that's not too harsh. There we go. So just at this stage, I'll tilt it. I don't know what the camera's picking up, whether it's you've got glare on it from there or what, but it looks really, really lovely. So next we have our centre flowers. So I'm going to leave this weird wiggly bit till the end. With the centre flowers, we've got a little bit of shape work to do. That sounds a little bit difficult, but it's not, because I always use the exact same lines everywhere in every orchid. As you'll have seen when we looked at the two that I coloured at the start, they're pretty much identical with where I've put highlights and shadows and things, and that's what I like to do. So with your eggplant, you're going to start on this right hand side petal, and not directly against the line, but following the curve of it, we're going to draw in a little curved line here. So it goes down here slightly, but it's a lot longer as we go over the top curve. Just do that for now. And then the next line, it's a bit of a weird one, this one. So we start at the bottom, doing pretty much the same thing in reverse. Coming up the edge. Trying to taper it a little bit as you go up, but it's not really too important. But then instead of carrying on as a line here, we take this little flick upward and we curve it around. So it's almost meeting this line, but not quite. Now this is something that I sort of made up on the spot when I googled pictures of orchids and tried to emulate how these petals look and where their highlights and shadows are. So do feel free to do your own research into reference photographs of orchids, because you might not want to do exactly the same as this, but I think it's quite effective. If you don't really know much about flowers like me, you would say it's pretty good, I guess, for an orchid, but I'm not a botanist, so I'm probably way off the mark. But it's how I've seen it, and it's how it's been processed in my mind. So all I've been doing there with the eggplant is just thickening it up at the bottom here, tapering off at each end, and again just leaving that nice fuzzy inner edge for our fuchsia to blend into. So at the top we want to do the same thing, leaving that fuzzy line a little bit thicker in the centre. And there we are. We can come back in again with the eggplant as we did before. Now with the fuchsia, we're going to drag this line a little bit further down, so almost right the way round. And of course, blend it into the eggplant line. You can also extend that just to about there, so kind of where the petal almost starts to point outward. But again, it's always best if you kind of taper it. It gives it more interest. I don't know why, it just looks thicker at one side, and it's probably the form of the petal. It just looks better to do it that way. Can you tell I'm no artist? Don't really know what I'm talking about. So with the fuchsia, again, all we're doing is thickening where we've put the eggplant and leaving a soft edge for the peony. Same down here. So I'm going to put some fuchsia in between this little, it's almost like a pincer shape, isn't it? Again, leaving a soft edge. We're not going too far with it, so we still want to keep some space in here for our next colours. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to skip back to the eggplant for a second and just bring this a little bit thicker over here. Okay, so it's more kind of squared off now at the back, but again, we don't want to make it harsh. So with your fuchsia, you can come in over the top of the line and then meet it here. Okay, so you've got this weird sort of backwards S going on. I'm going to take this moment quickly to just redefine that line with the eggplant so we don't lose it. I don't want it to be harsh, but I don't want to lose it either, so I'll just redefine that for a second. Now back to your fuchsia. We want to kind of create a look of sort of a circular highlight in the centre here. So we've almost got this circle going on, but all I'm going to do is bring this down here a little bit, so we've got more of a circular shape being created, and bring this up a little, so you see how we're now starting to get a circle. And then with soft pressure and scumbling motions, which is little circles, I'm slowly starting to bring that circle in. We're decreasing the circle to about that sort of level. So we still want room for the peony and of course the yellow. So make sure you've got around about that kind of space going on. So with the peony, we're doing exactly the same thing, using those little circles to scumble in our colour, so it's not, you know, it's not harsh, or I need to think of two other words than harsh and liney or linear. But I think you know what I mean. We're trying to get a soft, smooth look. So I'm bringing it in so the circle is getting smaller and smaller until you've just got a very small area that's still completely white and untouched. And the rest of it is blended. And when you're sort of happy with your placement, that's when you can come in with that yellow and fill in your circle. It's up to you if you want to leave a very, very tiny bit of white in the centre to maximise contrast, but what we're doing is we're increasing the circles now. So I'm going over the peony with the yellow. Quite hard pressure. But going over the peony with the yellow, almost in reverse of what we did on the back petals, really helps it to smooth out and look very soft. Skipping back to the peony for a second, if there's any areas that don't look as soft, you can do a very light layer. And basically you're skipping backwards and forwards with your colours until you've got the kind of soft gradient that you're after. So just keep working at it really. So that, I would say, is okay for now. Now with the peony, we also want to fill in this little area here in our pincers. So we're not doing the whole thing, but we are almost joining it together now. Almost. And then bringing the yellow in to complete the gap, to fill in the gap. Using the peony, as I say, you can go over, soften it up, because it does look quite neon if you just leave it with the yellow, and I think I just prefer it to look softer. And then with that yellow as well, you can go all the way around the edge of the petal that you've left in white. And of course, go over it with light peony. Now, if there are any areas you want to go back and touch up, for instance, the eggplant could look a little bit washed out now. If you want to redefine that slightly, you can go in and do that now. And then just keep reblending it out until you're happy. I think that's pretty nice. It's got a funny little curve to it, but I think it works because the flower, the orchid flower, does have some kind of odd lines and curves to it. Okay, so for this little bit here that we've sort of left white, just using your eggplant, you can fill that in. And just see how it follows the curve around. So using your other three colours to match it up. Okay, I don't know why I left that a little bit white, it just ended up getting forgotten about, but there we go. So we will do the other side now. Just managed to get a bit of pencil on that, so I'm just going to try and erase it as best I can. So the other side is slightly different. We haven't got this backwards S going on, we've got a little bit of a different configuration. So sorry, I've literally just realised that these petals here that we did first, the two bottom petals, they would actually be part of the flower in this background area. So we'll sort that out after. It's just I often realise things as I'm halfway through. Not very organised. Okay, so on this left-hand petal, we're going to create a similar curve to how we did before. Almost a mirror image. it down slightly in the centre. And then on the bottom, again. So another line that's not quite at the edge, but close enough. And then we're just going to start here, which is in the centre point of the two lines we just created, and do a little bit of a flick like that. So it's just a straight line with a little flick upward at the end. Very, very simple. Now I'm going to thicken the line at this end here and make sure it's tapered. So it's really narrow and thin here, but it's thicker at this end. Then I'm going to thicken up this area as well, just as we did before. So you see how it's thick going into thin, and then kind of the same at the bottom as well, just thicken it up over here. It doesn't have to be, you know, accurate and perfect, just as long as you've got the look of it. Don't forget to leave a little bit of light pigment to blend. Next colour is the Fuchsia. So we're going to extend again down here around this curve and colour underneath the eggplant line. And then underneath the middle line. And up against here. So usually I'd turn the book around, but I want to try and keep it still so you can see what I'm doing at every moment. We'll bring it up a little bit. So it should look a little bit like that. And then the Peony, so just making sure we've got that bit there to always blend into. Take your Peony and you can then join these together. And start to try and create that little circle again. So when you've come to this point where you have the circle done, we can leave it there for a second and look at our bottom area. So again, this can be joined up almost now here, and bring up some of this colour. So this is more sort of triangular maybe at the bottom than it is a circle. More pointed anyway. And then just making sure again, because I always forget, just to leave that little bit of pigment for it to blend into. You can bring in your yellow. Now going back to your peony, obviously this looks, you know, not blended at all, so we'll use that to just decrease the yellow slightly and soften it so it's not as bright. Same on the top as well. And at this stage you can go back to your eggplant and redefine everything. As you can see, it's still a little desaturated compared to this side. That just means everything needs relayering and redefining to bring the colour back, because they've all kind of dulled each other out. Especially when you put the light colours on top of the darker colours, it can dull them. So I'm redefining all of the dark ones. But still not forgetting to blend them out nicely. You can see how it's starting to look a little bit brighter now and more matching to the other side. Slight little bit of peony to go over it so it's not too bright. I think you know the deal by now. And then our yellow around the edges. So you see the difference between how bright the yellow looks around the edge here and how it's more dulled at this side when we've added just a very light layer of peony over it. And then just in this little white bit that we've left again, I'm going to put a bit of eggplant in here. I feel like it will be a shaded area. Got a lot of things sticking out. And again, just blend it out. So just using all your different colours to blend it. Just taking a step back to take a look at it, see if there's anything else you want to add. Okay, now for this little nodule in the middle, God knows what it is, we're going to use a little bit of fuchsia at the bottom, coming from this side. So just following the curve of it, and then the rest of it in yellow. Now you can pop a little bit of peony in there if you feel like you need that transition, but because it's quite a small area, you don't always need that transition colour. But I don't want to put any eggplant on it. I want to keep it quite light. It makes it look defined from either side, because I think if we put the eggplant in, we might lose it a little bit. We might lose the shape. There we go. So that is those two large petals. Again, you can just look, see if there's anything you want to clean up, if there's any lines that are looking a bit weird. But if not, you can move straight on to this odd looking bit in the middle of the flower. So first of all, let's do the largest one, which is this bottom area. So with your eggplant, we're going to draw a line up the centre. We're then going to bring out a triangular shape, just following the shape of this petal really, so it points downward, tapers down, and then exactly the same on the other side. So you've got a darker area in the middle and you've lightened your pressure as you've gone outwards both sides. And with your fuchsia, you can go around it, extending it out, but just still retaining this triangular shape. You can even bring it out a little bit at the bottom, both sides, with a tiny curve, as if you're going towards the two little stalks or whatever, two little tentacles. Very weird looking flower, isn't it, the orchid? It's almost alien. Then your peony, leaving that slight bit of white right at the edge because we're going to put our yellow there. Okay, so it should be looking something like that. Then going to fill it in with the yellow, the white that you've left. Fill it in with the yellow. And then of course use your peony to soften it out. Now I'll go back in with that eggplant and just make sure it's nice and blended. So we've kept that very dark area. We're not gonna lose it going dull to the lighter colours. We've kept that dark area, and it just gives that look of the flower bending upward like this. So there's like a dint in the middle, or a depression. Make sure that's nice at the top there. I think that's pretty much okay. So it should be looking something like that. So this little tongue that we've got in the middle, all we're going to do with that is we're going to take our eggplant and alongside here, so just one side of the tongue, we'll just do that. Get the fuchsia, thicken it up, get the peony if needed, just to add that lighter layer, and then the rest of it in yellow. So we've got a slight bit area of yellow along this side here, and then all yellow on the other side with our little peony layer over the top. And again, that just creates a little bit of look of highlight and shadow and a bit of look of form, rather than just filling it in. Okay, so just got these two little tails now. I don't really know what they are. They're, again, just something odd. I bet orchids have all different names for this, for all their different parts. But for now, we're just going to take our eggplant, bring it up from here where we, at the top of this triangle. And again, just leaving an edge, if possible. Make sure your pencils are nice and sharp. So we've left a little edge there. And the same over here. Then your fuchsia. And your peony. Very difficult when you're in a small area like this to have room. I'm just filling the rest of it in with yellow. And then redefining the eggplant a little. bit of fuchsia to blend, and then peony over any yellow that's looking too bright. Now we've got two little inner curves here which I'm just going to completely block fill with eggplant, because I think that looks like it would be in shadow. Okay, so you should have something that looks like that so far. As I said, you can go in, you can mess around, making sure it looks how you want it to look. Now I did mention that I'd actually forgotten that these two petals at the back would be part of the back of the orchid, so that gap in the middle is part of those petals. So just thinking about where your dark colours would be if these petals did continue, they'd be right here in the centre. Oh, that was a big break. They'd be right here in the centre, and coming up at the back here as well a little. And then the fuchsia just to fill the rest in. Might even go back to that eggplant and just do a layer of that over the fuchsia that we just put down, so it doesn't stick out much. It is going to be quite in shadow underneath there, so that's how I would do it anyway. So there are little dots or pips or whatever they are left on the three black back flowers or back petals, and all I do is just put some yellow in there. Now usually I wouldn't even bother going around these, I'd just colour straight over the top and use a paint pen or some actual acrylic paint to go over the top, because I hate colouring around little details, it just takes too long. And but with this one I've left them quite open, so just going over it with the yellow. You could obviously, like I say, use some paint or something, a gel pen, to make those stand out a little bit more, but as for me, I'm pretty happy with how that's turned out. So that is it, guys. That is how I coloured my orchids. Now I'm just going to take a look at the camera, and I can see that all you can see is wax. So if I just take it out of the light, you can see it better, how it looks. And I'm going to zoom out so that you can see all of them. And they all match. So hopefully this has been a really informative tutorial for you all, and it's going to help you when you're colouring your exotic flowers. Next up is going to be lilies, so you'll see that video appear on my channel shortly, and here's a sneak preview. So this is how I colour lilies. So yes, thank you so much for watching. It would really help me if you click the thumbs up button, if you subscribe to the channel, and leave me a lovely comment. Thanks so much, and I'll see you soon on Colour with Claire.